Hello everybody, welcome from London. We're here at the Big Data London conference and I'm happy to host a panel discussion with the title Compelling Use Cases for Big Data. So my name is Bas Geerdink, I work at ING, the bank, and I'm happy to have a great panel here from great people, and I have them all introduce themselves. We have Romain from Dataiku, we have Maciej from Genesys, we have Kevin from Unravel Data, and we have Richard from Oakland Data. So, please an introduction.
Well, I'm Romain Fouache, I'm VP Strategy at Dataiku. First of all, thank you very much for having me as part of the panel today. Dataiku is a software vendor that provides a collaborative data science platform to allow organizations to deliver data innovation and data projects.
Great, okay.
Maciej, Dabrowski, Chief Data Scientist at AI Group at Genesys. We are a market leader in customer experience software, heavily investing now into AI, and I'm running a group that builds AI products within Genesys, among other things.
Okay, good, yeah. Thanks.
Kevin Hannon with Unravel Data. We are a software company based in Palo Alto, focusing on application performance management for the big data stack. So happy to be here.
Great.
Cool, and Richard Corderoy from Oakland Data Analytics. We're a project-based analytical consultancy working predominantly in the operational area on a wide range of use cases.
Okay, great. Well, great to have you all here, guys, and happy to have a great discussion with you. Of course, what I said, we are here at Big Data London. Big data is already no longer a hype anymore. Everybody's doing big data. This is already the so many years in a row that we have this kind of conferences. But what I would like to hear from you, what is now one of the best examples that you've seen in the past year, so to say? Can I start with you, Romain?
Yes, of course. I mean, as I said, we're a software vendor and we are industry agnostic, so we have the luck of seeing many different use cases over broad ranges of industries. Big data, as you say, is kind of phasing out as a term. People want to use AI now. I'm not sure everybody's really clear as to what's the difference between one and the other. But I have to say that even though many of our customers are financial services companies, I always like when I see use cases that are more in the physical world. We had a good example this year in the manufacturing industry, but a customer who was building custom items in batch mode for some of their own customers, and they used Dataiku to help predict their margin of errors so that they would produce exactly the right number of items so that their batches were big enough to cover defects, but small enough to not run over costs. So it's this type of actually fairly simple in principle applications, but pretty advanced usage of predictive analytics that I like a lot.
That sounds good. I'd like to hear more about that. But first, Maciej, you work at Genesys, so what is your most compelling use case there, actually?
So I guess the interesting thing about the data side of Genesys really is that we first of all, we have a lot of customers, so by default we have a lot of data. We have over 10,000 customers, Fortune 100 and so on. But I think the interesting side really is that this omni-channel side of things, right? Because we do collect, historically it's a call center business, so we do have a lot of data from the call center, but there is a lot of data coming from different channels, like the web channel. We do track, for example, data, the interactions on the web that customers are involved with, and then we try to connect this data into different products, right? So for example, this holistic aspect where you can, once somebody calls the call center, you actually know that they've been on the website and you know a bit about them from the CRM and so on. That's, I think, is very interesting and promising use case. And by default, it also involves a lot of data and a lot of tenants. So it's
so how many customers do you service usually?
How many customers? So it depends. You mean like per customer, per business? Because we sell to businesses, right? And then these businesses have different types of customers. So it can be call centers with 1 million calls a day, for example. It can be e-commerce websites with millions of customers a day, and then you have a lot of events that they generate. So we are well into billions of events in terms of what we process.
That's big data, right?
So, it's a lot of big data, and I mean the big challenge though is the variety and being able to link the data together, I think.
Great. Okay, I'd like to hear more, but first to Unravel Data, what do you have an example of a great use case that you can share?
So with Unravel Data, we work with a number of different organizations helping them scale, specifically as they're trying to become more successful, not only in the first use case, but the future use cases. I think one of the interesting areas we see is within health insurance. So they started off with leveraging big data to identify fraud, waste, and abuse to ensure that the right payments were going to the right individuals, but they've evolved from that to really trying to look at all the data that they have, which is a plethora of data, to really try to get the right medication to the right patient. So the insurance companies are taking an active part in ensuring that their patients get the best care, and so that's going beyond just the health systems, but to health insurers as well. And that's a big challenge. There's a lot of data that goes into that. There's a lot of different factors, and we're talking about some really profound impact to the patients when they do deliver.
That's already quite advanced. So do you also service like companies that are still on the beginning of their journey, so to say, in the big data world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when organizations start off on a big data journey, they need to have some type of outcome that they're going to be able to plant the flag and say, this is what we're being successful with in big data. But scaling beyond that can become a challenge. There's challenges around skill sets, there's challenges around the right tools. There's a plethora of tools here at Big Data London, as you can see. And necessarily choosing the right one for the right job can be difficult. So I think choosing the right partners is important, and more importantly, ensuring that you're as successful in the future use cases as you are in the first use case is really important to maintain that momentum.
Okay, understand. Okay. All right, Richard, you work at Oakland, so what is some great use case that you can share with us?
So for me, great is small, and I'm a great fan. There's loads of people who can explain what's going to happen 5 years out and imagine the change in the world use case, but lots and lots of firms struggle with, so what do I do next, particularly if they're really early in the journey. And so we're working with a large project management firm who spend an awful lot of money on infrastructure around the UK, and they've sort of narrowed their use case down and down and down to actually, if only we could 1 year out have a much better forecast of whether this project was likely to be a success, on time, on budget than before. And that's a mixture of blending lots and lots of structured data, lots of invoicing data, and sort of data from the teams, but that's all pretty retrospective. So they're also trying to loop in much more textual sentiment analysis from reports from project managers and suppliers to see if they can find the early warnings that something may not be quite right. It's very real, and they can build that straight back into their business really quickly. Yeah.
Do you think that sometimes the targets are too ambitious, or like you say, you want to start small, you want to, you give example of the small use cases, but we talk about big data, artificial intelligence, that's the hybrid. So isn't it sometimes too far-fetched for organizations?
I think it may be lots of data, whether it's big or not is a moot point, but actually the basics of business haven't gone out the window. Really understand why you want to make the investment and what you want to get out of it. And if you can conceive the big use case that's detailed enough and specific enough, then go for it. But usually it's a learning journey for the organization as they sort of go on this walk. So start small, deliver something, your point, prove to the business that this isn't just hype, and then you can get more ambitious as things kind of move on.
Romain, do you have like a general approach for this kind of journeys? Because like Richard's saying, okay, they might envision something very big, but you have to do a lot of stakeholder management, maybe start small. How do you approach this kind of challenge?
It's very interesting the way you've described it, because we do have some type of a maturity model that we work with the organization, because we've been involved with company at every stage of the maturity, and I completely agree with what you described. First, if that's the stage at which they are, help people not be dependent on their existing or future infrastructure, but to start being able to demonstrate that there is a potential value, and that's what we help them with the skills that they have at hand, with the infrastructure at hand, do some first demonstration that there is a potential value. That's step one. Step two is to actually execute the value in the business context, and that's something that's often missed. It's to think of not only designing a project, but having it have a business impact in the processes. And so here we help them and provide them with the way to integrate their projects into their actual business environments. And once that's done, usually you have buy-in, you have people who want it to move forward, and then the idea is to expand and align the people around that. So step 3 is more about acceleration, and it's bringing together the various initiatives you might have on data in the single environment. It's providing them with the tools that facilitate reuse, that facilitate automation, that facilitate maintenance of the ones that are already there. And it's also about making it a bit more pervasive in the organization, allowing not only the complex projects, but also individuals to work on the simple ones. That's the step 3. And then step 4, it's basically systemizing it and allowing everyone who's basically going to make a decision in the organization to leverage either the self-service approach or the more operational approach to improve their decisions. And so we help our customers, regardless of where they are on the journey, understand where they are, understand what are the key challenges that they probably are going to be facing, because even if each journey is different, the barriers are things that we tend to see again and again, and help them find a way to work around that.
Yep.
And unfortunately, it's not only about software. I wish I could say, you have the software, it's going to work perfectly,
No,
but it's about the software, it's about the people, it's about the processes. There's a whole amount of change to be done to make sure that you not only de-silo the data and the technologies, but also the teams and the processes.
Yeah. I recognize a lot of what we've been doing at ING, because the data is there, that's there. Usually there's also some software available that's there, but actually the key is to bring together the right disciplines and to actually work use case driven. That's what you said, right?
Definitely.
Pick a point and where you can work towards. Okay. Maciej, I don't know if you've been through all these maturity levels yet.
I actually think I'm real lucky as a company in a way, because in terms of processes and delivering these sort of maturity levels, let's say, like in our case, we have both the top-down and bottom-up approach to this. So there is a top-down clear strategy to innovate into AI, and there is a mandate to actually build these products and innovate and deliver to our customers. But there is also the top and bottom up really, right when we have a team that is tasked with actually delivering things. But our touch point with this sort of process is actually coming from the fact that we have a suite of products, and building these products is sort of like interacting with the customer, right? Because we go first through ideation, we have to have a business case.
Yep.
We have a research team that does some initial evaluation of these different approaches. We do start small because deploying at scale brings in all sort of different challenges that is not necessarily helping you to iterate quickly and fail quickly. We've learned those lessons in my previous life as well. But I think it's super important. So to that point, I think it's really something important to highlight, that if you are starting the journey, do not necessarily think about can I get petabytes of data and solve all the problems in the world. More, how much data do I need and how can I get it to actually show value? Once you do that, think how you can move this into product, how you can build a product around it, and then scale it out.
Yeah. So Kevin, can you share, because you've done many of this in this industry already, can you share some of the common pitfalls or challenges that organizations can fall into when they start these kind of projects?
Sure. Yeah, I think some of the common pitfalls really come around not necessarily taking the best practices that you learn in the different stages of the journey and continuing to have the rigor to apply those as you grow. Yeah. So we talk about having a grand vision. I think having a grand vision is important in terms of what you're trying to accomplish, but there needs to be many checkpoints as often as possible to ensure that you're delivering success consistently. And some of the lessons that you learn in the early stages of your big data journey are oftentimes made again and again and again as you continue, because there's always going to be new technologies that come to bear. Early stage of Hadoop, it was on-premise, then now everyone's talking about migration to the cloud. And a lot of the people are doing the same mistakes as they move to the cloud that they made when they moved to Hadoop in the first place. So I think it's really important that you take the lessons learned and then you apply the technology and the tools that are available to you to be able to essentially become more efficient. I think skill sets will always be a challenge. Having enough or access to enough individuals who have the skill sets to be able to make you successful is important. So continuing to invest in that is crucial. And the companies that I've seen be the most successful are the ones that are constantly at events like this, speaking, talking about the interesting things that they're doing, constantly recruiting top talent. So I think it's very important to ensure that the lessons that you learn, you're continuing to apply throughout the journey.
Do you actually see some differences in sectors? Like is banking different or finance different from a government or from retail, or what's your experience there? Yeah,
so I think different sectors have different challenges for sure. I think a lot of the early stage big data technologies originated in the government sectors. They were then open sourced and came into web properties where they had access to a tremendous resource. I think finance has done a really good job of really applying some of the big data technologies to impact their business, both in terms of revenue generating and reducing fraud, waste, and abuse and risk mitigation. And I think retail has done some really interesting things as well. I think some of the laggard industries, healthcare, are still doing very interesting things. Starting on the insurance side, moving over to the health system side, but I think finance tends to be the biggest adopter of technology the quickest, but a lot of them are very slow to adopt the cloud because there's the challenges associated with security in the cloud. So it's very interesting to see how it plays out over time.
Yeah, that's what I noticed as well. For example, the first challenges and obstacles that we came across were all in the terms of security and privacy, because there was data, but it was not so easy to extract it from the core systems, for example, that we have. Well, any other sector might say, okay, yeah, of course the data should be stable and secure, but our challenge is actually to get the data in, to get data from maybe from what Maciej is saying, get the proper customer feedback or the customer points there. Actually, I want to get back to Richard, because you mentioned a really small point about small data, right? So is big data also applicable to small organizations, like SMEs?
I think it is. I think it is, but in a sort of caveated way. It does require a team and a degree of investment to actually make it happen.
Right.
You need people who can, use the tools, through to people who can organise the data, to people with the vision. Now, those people exist, and there's no reason why a SME with a team of 2 or 3 people can't do lots and get data from open sources and the like. But the self-service tools and the sort of democratization of this are making strides, but certainly I think it's got a little way to go before the average SME can just access it and do their own thing. I'm sure there are some small businesses out there doing great stuff, but unless your business is about data, if you're just a regular small business, I think it's quite a leap probably to to really start exploiting this.
Do you recognize it, Romain? Because if I have a small company and I come to Dataiku, what do you say?
So I think I completely recognize it, what you're saying. We have some small companies, customers that are more, I would say, have some appetite with data. One of the things actually we work on at Dataiku is trying to lower as much as possible the entry skill requirements, meaning if you're kind of a SQL or Excel++ user, you will be able to do things as visually point and click based as you can. You can do some AutoML, and at the same time, you can also do some advanced coding in it. So for small companies where there is limited skill, obviously there needs to be the will to do big data, so it's only going to be a fraction of them, but as soon as the will is there, usually the skill is not the barrier anymore. It's more going to be about can they actually allocate the resources to work on this type of topics a bit before knowing if there is an opportunity directly there. Then again, as I said, we have some customers who are SMEs, more digital native companies, and that do make a good use of big data overall.
All right, that's interesting,
I think one of the interesting things about that is that a lot of the organizations that you see here in the tools, they're bringing their technologies to the cloud platforms and the cloud marketplaces that exist. So, Unravel Data, we exist in the Azure marketplace, we exist in the Amazon Web Services marketplace, but it doesn't replace the skill sets. At the end of the day, there's a number of tools out there. Those tools, you can spin up a cluster in 10 minutes if you wanted to, but being able to leverage that to impact your business in a profound way requires the skill sets, requires a vision, requires investment. So just because you have access to the tools doesn't mean that it's going to replace the need for the people in process to be able to leverage them effectively.
And I would say the reflection of here is, if you walk in, unless you live and breathe this world, it's a sea of vendors, and everyone's products are good and do their thing. But looking at the stands, they kind of all do the same thing at a glance, and it's very so you've got to invest a lot of time to decipher the world and actually who does what and what do you really do, and that's I think almost one of the bigger barriers.
And if we did the exercise recently of looking at the taglines of the vendors in the space, and it's basically impossible to distinguish one from the other. So indeed, if you look into the detail, you understand it, but it's challenging. And even worse than that, the core underlying technologies themselves, when you look at how fast they change and how fast they move. If you look at Hadoop became big and then started to go down, Spark has gone up fast, then containers even bigger, SQL database down. When you're devising your grand strategy and you need to think about what are you going to do in 5-10 years, and you're not even going to know what is going to be the good technology in 6 months, what are the skills that I'm going to need for that, and what skills are still going to be available in 5 years. And you started with Pig 3 years ago, you're having a hard time in your journey. So what we're saying is that's what I call the velocity paralysis. It's moving so fast that people kind of get stuck in the headlights and just don't know where to go and what to do anymore.
So it's an interesting problem, right? Because in the past, so for example, if you think about a startup, right, that deals with web scale data, and we have seen those like all over the place, right? It's definitely a big data problem, right? And let's say 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, this is simply not possible because the technologies weren't out there. So I think it's also fair to say that the ecosystem of tools has stepped up a lot in the last 5-10 years. So now, even if you're a small company, there are tools out there that you can start with, and those sort of use cases are possible. But if you want to make this step into actual, proper way of doing that in a way, there's definitely skill set, but also providers like you guys and so on, like Dataiku, that help you on the journey. Because so I'm just highlighting really that we're still happy that we do it now, and I think it's easier to enter that world now than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Yes. Because you don't have to deal with lack of tools, you deal with abundance of tools and picking them.
So at Genesys, how do you assure that there's alignment between all those teams and technologies and business and IT, and you also have so many vendors, of course, that want to have insight into that as well. How do you manage that?
It's a journey.
Yeah.
And it's a particularly interesting journey because Genesys historically acquires a lot of different companies. So as a structure, we are very, we have a lot of, let's say, small families in the big family. However, there are a lot of strategic initiatives that bring them all together. Do common things, have a common way of doing X, common tooling for going to the cloud, deploying to other, and so on. So I think by ensuring from a top down that you're not repeating your work across teams, that you have a common decision point or a strategy to actually deliver this in 5 years or 2 years and so on, that really helps. So this is how we do that. There will be always, so there's also this argument about empowering people, especially if you think about building microservices and so on. There's the other side where we try to empower teams to pick their own tools. So nothing preventing one product to use one database and different product using different database, as long as you have a good argument. Like there's an extra cost doing that. Why are you choosing X over Y? So it's definitely a strategic consideration.
Kevin, one question for you. What's the next big thing? What would you advise to your top customers? Okay, this is now something. This is the new cutting edge.
I mean, that's a difficult question because I think the next big thing is going to be different to a different industry, to a different organization. I think a lot of the success that people have had with big data is there's still a long journey to be had with that. In all the customers that I work with, there's a number of customers that are probably 3 or 4 years ahead of some of the other customers that I'm working with, and that's not to say that they're not going to have success. But I think it's important that you don't get analysis paralysis and just try to go after that next shiny object each and every time. But making sure that you're being diligent about the decisions that you're making and the data that's backing up that decision, and then ensuring that you see it through to success. I think Hadoop has a long way to run in a lot of different organizations. I think cloud, there's still things that are being worked out, like security, which you had mentioned earlier. But that's not to say that all these technologies can't add a tremendous amount of value in different areas of the organization. So ensuring that there's that transparency, that there's honestly a broader vision around why you're adopting different sets of technology will ensure that organizations can continue to stay innovative.
Yeah, okay, great. And Richard, a question for you. Don't you think it's becoming indeed too technical, everything? Like it's becoming too technocratic. I've been here at Big Data London for 2 days now, and it's all about the latest database. But who cares about a database, right? It's about the end product, right?
Well, you should care about the latest database. It's important. And the technology and the stack is really important. I think we alluded to it right at the start. So you've got to build teams and bring teams together that get it, and you need people who are into this, because actually it makes a massive difference, not just having the latest shiny thing for the sake of it, but processing times, and if you want, depending on the speed and cadence of your analytics, there are things that really do transform the way you do that. It's been able to extend that team all the way up through the management layer at some point where there's an interest in it, through to completely non-technical management, and I think the real trick is actually maintaining that stack. So
you should not put the data scientist into a corner somewhere and have them their party on data, right?
I think lots of organizations have tried this, and unfortunately my experience is those scientists tend to leave fairly quickly because they're not tasked terribly well, they're not helped terribly well, and actually everyone's a bit disappointed.
Yeah. Maciej, what if I say in your company you have a stack of big data use cases, and there's always enough ideas to go around, right? And there's always never enough resources and people to implement them. That's always the case.
That's true.
But how do you prioritize them? How do you value what's important for the company in the next year or so?
So I think there are different decision points at different levels and horizons, right? Because we have a couple of different challenges that impact what we do technologically as well. Like for example, our customer base, even though we are cloud, we big into the cloud, a lot of our customer base is on-premise, right? And that by default is a big factor in terms of what technologies we pick, because there's always a question, can we deploy it on-premise? Like if so, how we do it? Do we do a hybrid? We have different products in our suite. Some of them are cloud only, some of them are hybrid or cloud first, and so on. So. And that's a more long-term discussion. where you need to be able to say, well, hopefully in a few years everybody will be in the cloud and our life will be so easy.
Yeah. But there's still not a use case. Eh? That's the technology side of things. Eh? I mean,
that's not
what if the product owner would? I mean, you will have people on your desk saying, "Okay, I want this, I want this, I want this." Mm-hmm. There has to be somebody who makes the decision. So, okay, let's do this first.
So the way that has historically happened was we have products, obviously, and product owners, and they take into account what sort of data volumes they have to deal with, how to integrate with the ecosystem we have, because we have a big ecosystem to integrate with, and then we'll make some technology choices, or at least proposals. And then we make sure we cross-pollinate and talk to different stakeholders to say, for example, how we would put this into cloud, how we put this on-prem. Is it the right way to go? We would run some MVPs, evaluate performance of databases, we would like Mongo, DynamoDB, Cassandra, and so on. Do we need a key value store, right? So what key value stores do we pick is a good question. Like we used to run Cassandra, but now when we move to the cloud, we don't want to run it ourselves, we want to do the hosted thing, so then maybe DynamoDB and so on. And the question is how you deploy the same service on premise. So these decisions typically come through products, but in terms of processes, we have this sort of a guild, let's say, creation, where we try to make sure that all the people that are interested in the same technology have to give their input, essentially.
And there are a lot of them?
In some cases more, in some cases less.
Okay,
I think it helps. One of the things that usually helps is to put the ownership as close together as possible. Right. So the last thing you want to do is to have approvals from 10 people. It should be more opinions from 10 people, but there is one source of approval. And that's as well, this seems to me as a good way to go.
Well, that's also one thing on the business side we've not talked about, is things like governance and metadata management, etc. Romain, how do you see that? Is that an important aspect still in the big data industry where everybody just dumps his data on Hadoop?
No, it's a fundamental aspect of the big data effort. And I think if you look at the space and how it has changed, there's one element that has drastically compressed is the time and performance of building predictive model. There are two elements that have not changed much, is getting data that you're confident in and getting the models in production after that. I was working on training neural networks for demand forecasting in 2002 for companies. So it was taking me like 6 months to get data, 6 months to train a model, and then 6 months to put it in production. I think since that time, things have changed. And the models were not that good, to be honest, at that time. We're using like very, very poor technologies. And I think what has changed that much is the 6 months in the middle, they are now like 1 week or 2 weeks, and you can definitely take that to the minimum. But getting data that you trust and putting things in production are still about the same effort as they were some time ago. And so governance, the more data is being used, the more it's becoming important, and we still don't have universal solutions to that. And I think that as we've seen as of today, most companies still have to build their own approach, their own processes, and select their own technologies in order to do that.
Yeah, okay. Kevin, question for you. Have you ever come across a use case at Unravel where you had to say no? Because it was, I don't know, too complex, or it was not feasible yet, or?
Well, at Unravel, we're application performance management for the big data stack. So we have a very defined set of customers that are leveraging our technology and are leveraging the insights that we can provide to their applications to do things like cloud migration or to ensure that they continue to scale efficiently and effectively. I would say that depending on what stage of the journey customers are at, there might be circumstances that don't align with what Unravel can do for them today. Okay. But what I've seen more importantly than that is that organizations that perhaps have insights beyond what we're doing today want to partner with us and want to help us get there. So I think organizations that have a vision that are walking down a path of going to whatever their future state architecture is, they want to ensure that they can pick the right set of vendors and partners to ensure that they can help them on that journey and make them successful with a similar value proposition when they get to that future state. But from a use case perspective, I think there's a lot of folks like to talk about the big sexy use cases of big data being like fraud, waste, and abuse and next best offer and recommendation engines. But there's a lot of value that's being had around traditional things like ETL and data warehousing offload, which are not that interesting to talk about, but there's millions and millions of dollars being saved at large organizations doing it. So I think it's really important to pick the right technologies for the right use cases, and there are use cases that I've seen on big data that probably don't make sense for big data, but then there's a lot of use cases that I've seen not on big data that are big data problems that should be on big data.
Well, I think you have a good point, because use cases about big data, usually we think about the external facing use cases, like the things that people see on the street or in the app, or the self-driving cars, those kind of use cases. But I think there's also a lot of gain in the internal use cases, like cost savings for your own company, so to say. Do you have something to share with us, Richard?
I would echo that completely. Particularly, blending big data and Industry 4.0 and all these sorts of things. Yeah. Many firms have effectively Internet of Things producing terabytes of data. It's a fire hose, and actually historically they don't really know what to do with it. And actually, everything from predictive maintenance to optimizing the length you can run a machine or a process. These are all sort of quite simple use cases, quite real, and actually back to proving the benefit. If I can run a machine 20% longer, it's pretty easy to prove the business case for that, and it's a great place to start.
Okay.
One bit I would add to the previous conversation actually there about how important the data is, I think one of the things we need to work at is much greater data awareness at more senior levels, because I don't think organizations very often know what data they have and have really thought through the art of the possible there, and particularly as things change, do the people who actually decide the use cases or decide which ones get pursued actually have a good understanding of what they're sat on and the value within that.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I want to finish off in a few minutes. So I have one last topic, and actually because we are here at a Big Data conference, of course, where we share ideas and knowledge, etc. So what can we do as an industry, as vendors, suppliers, use cases, product developers? What can we do as a community, basically, to make these things easier and better for any company? Romain, what do you think about that?
Yes, our vision at Dataiku is that the proper way to make that easier is first to try to decouple as much from the complexity of the underlying infrastructure, and second, to make it as open as possible. Basically, ultimately, what we want, as we said, is to optimize every decision that can be made in an organization with data. So it means that whether you're business-minded, you're data-minded, you're data science-minded or IT-minded, you should be able to contribute in the data effort. So the broader you can open your platform and your data projects, the more involved you can get the people, and the better the results you're going to get.
Okay. And you do it from Dataiku, of course, You provide the tools and technologies.
So we've built the tool that goes with our vision. That does not say that it is the only way to do it. We certainly like this one, but I think that there is a shift in organizations today. When you look at how much more efficient companies are that use data compared to those that don't, there's probably some kind of a survival of the fittest that is happening, and people who don't leverage their data properly won't survive. And I certainly do wish for people to be able to do it properly, whether it's with Dataiku or without. Obviously, I'd prefer Dataiku, but whichever way works is good.
Is there any other way where you can share more, or share ID, or have a platform for these kind of discussions, or something like that?
So you mean between organizations or within organizations?
Yeah.
That's a possibility. My deep feeling is that there again, it's not only about technology. When a company is transforming itself with data, it's transforming its own business processes, and it means that it needs to tailor its data effort to its processes, and not its processes to its data effort, by the way, which is an important point. And so I think that yes, there is some cross-pollination between industries and between companies, but the most important part where you want to have collaboration and interaction is actually within your own organization, because you have broad skills, very segmented, but that together can do a lot.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Maciej, what do you think?
I think there's a slight difference between the perspective of a vendor and a company that builds products. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of overlap in the sense as well, and I think there are a couple of things I would maybe highlight that I think can help in general. So first of all, and it's not rocket science really, you just have to go and do it. So first of all, building trust and showing value. So a lot of these things is like, okay, it's really hard to do it, and what I'm really getting out of it. So the simple ability of saying, well, it's actually not that difficult, it's very simple. Yeah. And here's what are you going to get from it, right? Yeah. And then when people see dollar values and clear use cases, they're like, oh yeah, it's actually not that difficult, we could do that. And I think, so use cases where I'm hinting really, and sharing the stories of customers. And especially in a domain, like, we talked about banking sector and so on. And same in terms of transforming to cloud. If one bank moves to the cloud, then the other banks will say, hang on, they've done it, right? So why aren't we not doing the same, right? Because they are maybe paving the way. So I think ability to essentially show in each sector and each size of a company how you could do that, how they've done it. It wasn't that difficult, perhaps, or hopefully.
You think that the market is ready for that? Are people willing to share it already in that sense so much?
It's an interesting question. Like, I would say, I think yes, but maybe there are elements of the market that would say probably not. So I mean, I would defer to the guys because I think they have more experience in that angle.
Okay. Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a perfect segue into what I was going to say anyway. So I think one of the things that we all have is we all have relationships with organizations that are at different stages of their journey, and building the connections between those organizations to be able to share what they're doing, what their pitfalls were, things that they should think about. I've noticed that organizations that are on this path of open source and big data and cloud, they want to talk about what they're doing, and more importantly, they want to hear what everyone else is doing. We do a lot of work within the financial services organization. 2 peers responsible for the big data platforms at 2 of the largest banking organizations in the world are on the phone with each other this week with an introduction that we had set up. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they're competitors, but at the end of the day, they're trying to bring the best technologies to their customers. They're trying to ensure that their business can thrive on the investments that it's made over the course of the last 5, 6, 7 years. It's very important that us as vendors understand that the real work starts when they become a customer, not in the process of getting them to a customer, so that we're constantly focused on making them wildly successful so that they can continue to grow and scale out their organization, their business, and ultimately their investment in your technologies.
Yeah, in a way you have a unique position where you will work for multiple customers that deal with the same kind of problems, of course.
Absolutely.
And then if you have this kind of facilitation opportunity, then it will be benefiting for many organizations there.
The challenges are the same at every stage of the journey. There's the ones that you start off with, there's the ones in the middle stages you really start to scale, and then when you get to that hyper scale, those are the ones that everyone runs into the exact same ones, and it's important that we as vendors help them down the path of understanding where those pitfalls are, and then introducing them to folks who don't take it from us, take it from somebody who's been down that path already.
Great. Richard, do you see any huge improvements for the industry or the commodity as a whole?
I think we're doing a lot of things well right now. I think we do want to talk about what we're doing. It's very topical. It is nice that the management are interested in what we're bringing, and I think the challenge actually over the next few years is to build transparency and avoid hype. We have vendors, let's work out what they do, let's help the technical teams in the business really pull together good plans that can endure, and then let's make sure that communication both up, and I also agree completely actually between people on various stages of the maturity journey, so that they can learn one another, and there's a good ecosystem out there. So I think we're doing lots of that, but there is also the fog of hype which we need to kind of keep patting down.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Well, I think that is a good finish up, a good wrap up for this session. I would like to thank you for your contributions, and you'll be sticking around at Big Data London for a while, I think. Yeah, for the rest of the day. Let's catch up and share the good ideas that we've been sharing so far. I want to thank the audience at home for watching and for listening, and hope to see you at the next BrightTalk panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.